the hour, Max from the Nerd Desk.
Thank you so much for bringing me on, Mr. M. I really appreciate it.
I mean, of course. Look how much you've done on comic comparison.
It's been a journey.
Yes, and that's why tonight, ladies and gentlemen, in front of a live audience, you'll be comparing Watchmen.
You mean Daredevil Born Again?
No, I said you'll be doing Watchmen.
Excuse me? I already did the Watchmen video.
Already did Watchmen. Shut up! Calling that a video. You know, you made a lot of mistakes on that little show of yours. Some of your editing has been pretty choppy, and you've been missing that copy of New Frontier for over a year. And in the Days of Future Past video, you picked the movie over the book?
It's my show.
But besides all of that, your biggest mistake from the very beginning has always been Watchmen. This has been a long time coming.
So what, you want me to just compare it again?
Yes, but not Snyder's Watchmen. Instead, you'll be doing Watchmen Chapter 1 and 2.
The animated movies, of course. And what if I say no?
You'll do what I say, or else you and your program will be gone forever.
In 1986, the comic world was shaken by Alan Moore's Watchmen, making it one of, if not the best comic book / graphic novel of all time. And back in season 1 of this show, I compared it to the Zach Snyder adaptation from 2009. Very, very poorly. That video had no sense of structure, was full of misinformation, and had very bad editing. So today I'm attempting to redeem myself by revisiting the comic and comparing it to the 2024 animated movies Watchmen Chapters 1 and 2. Like Batman The Dark Knight Returns, which also came out in 1986, it tells the story of the original book across 2 movies and was directed by Brandon Vietti, who also directed Batman Under the Red Hood. And look, this is a very layered story with a lot to offer, so while I'm obviously going to go through the story, I'm not going to go into super crazy detail unless it's for the comparison. Regardless of this video's outcome, I'd recommend reading this book no matter what. I've been looking forward to this all season, and I don't want to waste any more of your time, so with all that being said, let's go find out who killed the comedian and who watches the Watchmen.
You shut up!
The story begins in New York on October 13th, 1985. The police are investigating the death of Edward Blake, who was thrown to his death from his apartment window. As they deduce what happened, we see the fight happening in real time, and it's not pretty. They finish their investigation, but as they leave the building, a new one starts, headed by Rorschach, who sets the tone with a great narration.
Rorschach's Journal, October 12th, 1985. Dog carcass in alley this morning. Tire tread on burst stomach. This city is afraid of me. I have seen its true face.
He picks up the bloodstained smiley face button, then grapples up into the apartment and finds a hidden room in the closet housing the equipment and costume of the comedian, a hero who's been active since 1939 and is one of the only 2 legal heroes left after the Keene Act in 1977. So, thinking there's a cape killer in town, he takes off to warn his old Watchmen teammates. First is Dan Dryberg, formerly the Night Owl, who's currently having a late-night beer session with Hollis Mason, the original Night Owl from the 40s and 50s. He walks home to his apartment to find the lock on his front door broken and his beans eaten by Rorschach, who tells him about the comedian's death.
Investigated a routine homicide. Victim named Edward Blake. Found the costume in Blake's wardrobe. Seems he was the comedian.
They talk more in Dan's workshop, where all of his superhero stuff is kept, and we see that the 2 were actually good friends back in the day, but are on shaky ground now because one of them is retired and the other one is an unhinged hobo. Rorschach then coldly ends the conversation, leaving Dan with the smiley face button and some mixed feelings. In the movie, this is followed by a flashback to the 70s, which does appear in the comic, but a little later. The police are on strike because of the heroes, so Dan and the comedian have to contain it, and the latter takes it pretty far. I can't lie, this is probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole story.
Now, let's really put these jokers through some changes.
Anyways, Rorschach then goes to a bar to try to get some information. One of the patrons makes fun of him, so he proceeds to break the man's fingers one by one, even though nobody knows anything.
I didn't mean anything.
Then he takes to the high-rise office of Adrian Veitz, the smartest man on Earth, aka Ozymandias. He thinks it could have been a political killing, since the comedian did a lot of government work over the years, but Rorschach just insults him for monopolizing his hero persona and leaves. Seeing a trend here?
If that makes him a Nazi, you might as well call me a Nazi too.
That's what a Nazi would say.
Again, the movie has another comedian-related flashback that happens later in the comic. This time, it's 1966, and Captain Metropolis is trying to form a new team called the Crime Busters. Adrian likes the idea, but the comedian shuts it down with the cynicism we've come to expect.
It doesn't take a genius to see that America has problems that need tackling.
And it takes a moron to think they're small enough for clowns like you guys to handle.
I don't have a problem with this flashback on its own, but the fact that it's here is a little weird because a certain someone is very visible in the back before he's properly introduced, and that is kind of important, but whatever. Rorschach's last visit takes him to the Rockefeller military base. As he sneaks in, he logs what happened to all of the Minutemen, the last team of heroes from the 40s. As we already know, Hollis Mason was the original Night Owl and is now retired, the comedian is dead, the Silhouette was murdered, Captain Metropolis died in a car crash, Dollar Bill was shot during a bank robbery, Hooded Justice disappeared, Mothman was put into an asylum, and Silk Spectre is retired in California. In short, there really aren't many heroes left. Once he gets inside the base, we meet the most famous character from the entire story, and the only actual superhero, John Osterman, aka Dr. Manhattan.
Good evening, Rorschach.
Good evening, Dr. Manhattan.
And speaking of Silk Spectre, we also meet the second one, her daughter, Lori. She doesn't like him very much. I mean, can you blame her? This guy's a freak.
You know he tried to rape my mother when they were both Minutemen.
I'm not here to speculate on the moral lapses of men who died in their country's service.
Manhattan teleports Rorschach outside at Lori's request, since they are a couple, and then in the movie we get Manhattan's comedian flashback, which indulges in some revisionist history. You see, in this universe, Dr. Manhattan and the comedian both fought in the Vietnam War, and they won very easily, making Vietnam the 51st US state. Anyways, the two are talking inside a bar until a pregnant woman walks in to confront Blake about their child. He tells her off in a very racist manner, she cuts his face with a bottle, and he guns her down while Manhattan watches. It's a pretty powerful scene. Back to the main story, we arrive at the comedian's funeral, and in the comic, this is where we get the flashbacks for Dan, Adrian, and John. All of these characters remember his impact on their lives as his coffin is lowered into the ground. It's something the Snyder film did pretty well too. At the same time, Lori visits her mother Sally in California, and despite the fact that she was assaulted by the comedian, she's awfully sad about his death, which leads into a flashback of the Minutemen taking group photos. Sally leaves the group to go change, but Blake walks in and beats her, but before he could fully assault her, Hooded Justice walks in and saves her, thankfully. While this scene continues to show what Blake was like before he died, it also shows the complicated relationship between Sally and Lori. She might not have gone to the funeral, but someone who did was Edgar Jacoby, who goes home to find Rorschach waiting for him. Turns out Jacoby used to be Moloch, a villain from the 60s, and the reason he went to the funeral is because the comedian broke into his house late at night before he died. He was drunk and rambling about the ultimate joke, an island of artists and writers, a list that apparently Jacoby is on. Unfortunately, he also has terminal cancer, but Rorschach does let him off the hook, for now. Then he himself goes to the comedian's tombstone to pay respects, while telling a joke of his own about the great clown Palagacci. Moving on, we next see Lori in bed with Manhattan. Several Manhattans, actually. She quickly freaks out and walks out of the bedroom to find a third Manhattan working on a machine. Wrong! They get into an argument about their relationship, which ends with Lori storming off to go see Dan. The two had dinner together earlier in the story, which I didn't mention at the time. Sorry. Back at Rockefeller, Manhattan suits up for a TV interview and teleports to the studio. And the actual interview itself does some world building about the Cold War and how much more tense it is because Dr. Manhattan exists. But mixed in between these questions is a scene where Lori and Dan walk home from dinner and get cornered by the Knot Tops, a local gang culture. So they have a pretty ugly and scrappy fight in the alleyway while Manhattan answers exceedingly more politically aggravating questions. A reporter from the Nova Express eventually tells him that several people he was close with have gotten cancer, including Jacoby and his ex-lover Janie Slater. Manhattan is quickly overwhelmed by the accusations and swarming reporters, and he teleports them all out of the building.
How does it feel knowing you may have doomed hundreds of people?
Leave me alone!
Then he grabs an old photo of a couple, tells a janitor at Rockefeller that he's leaving Earth, and teleports to Mars. Now, this next sequence is another personal favorite. Part of Manhattan's superpowered state is that he experiences time all at once, and his backstory is presented in that way. He's walking away into the red sand, he's dropping the photo, he's looking at the photo, all while we learn that John was the son of a watchmaker and grew up into a physicist. While working for the government, he met Janie Slater. The two fell in love, and it seems like a happy ending until 1959, when he accidentally got trapped inside of a machine that removes an object's intrinsic field. John was completely vaporized, and everyone thought he was dead, until a circulatory system is seen walking around, a partially muscled skeleton is seen screaming in the hallway. Then finally, 1960. He's fully reborn in the cafeteria, and a lot of men suddenly became self-conscious. He's named Dr. Manhattan after the Manhattan Project from World War II. He promises Janie that he still loves her even in this new form, a fabricated lie since he leaves her to hook up with Laurie soon after. She's 16, by the way. Nixon asks him to intervene with Vietnam, which he does, and they win the war later that month. Back on Mars, John is tired of the human conflicts and struggles, saying that from his perspective, life and creation in general is a clock without a craftsman. This is probably the biggest use of the clock motif in the story. They are everywhere. John's father was a watchmaker, the doomsday clock, no, not that one. Even the bloodstained button is a clock. I had to look that one up, but still. But finally, after this monologue, Manhattan concentrates, and from the sand comes a giant glass structure. That's some good storytelling right there.
A clock without a craftsman.
Back on Earth, Rorschach visits Jacoby again, interrogating him about Manhattan's disappearance since that would cause global issues, all while keeping him locked in a fridge.
Can I come out then?
No. Deep breath.
He leaves, but gives Jacoby a way to contact him if he gets any leads. One small sequence the movie didn't keep was Rorschach buying Dan's newspaper and giving it to him. Anyways, after Manhattan abandoned America, Laurie was kicked out of Rockefeller, and since she doesn't want to stay with her mother, Dan takes her in. Then we see Adrian at Veidt Tower when an assassin enters and tries to shoot him. He's able to disarm the guy in style, but he swallows a poison capsule before he can get answers. Later, Rorschach receives a tip from Jacoby, and that night he goes to his place, only to find him dead via bullet to the face, and the cops now outside.
Free. Set up. Walk right into it. Stupid.
He freaks out realizing he was set up, but when the cops arrive, he fights his way out with a homemade flamethrower, his grappling hook, and a conveniently placed window. He tries to get up and fight the surrounding police, but he's quickly overpowered, detained, and unmasked.
My face! Give me back my face! Give me back my face! Give me back my face!
This is where the first movie ends, and overall it's almost a complete recreation of the book, like panel for panel and line for line. But before we continue, how many of you knew that the Watchmen were originally going to be Charlatan Comics characters? In 1983, DC had bought up most of their catalog, and Alan Moore wanted to use them for this story, which he was calling Who Killed the Peacemaker. But DC wanted to save them for other things, so he became the comedian, The Question became Rorschach, Blue Beetle became Night Owl, and so on. By that logic, somewhere out there is a version of the Peacemaker show that's about the comedian instead, which actually sounds kind of sick. I'd watch that.
Again.
Anyways, part 2 of the movie and the rest of the book start with Rorschach, now known as Walter Kovacs, in Sing Sing prison. His therapist, Dr. Long, ironically starts off the appointment with a Rorschach test, which he doesn't like very much.
You keep calling me Walter. I don't like you.
It's through these appointments that we learn more about his past. His mother was a prostitute, and he never knew his father, and he's always been pretty violent because he was bullied as a kid. We also find out why his mask, or his face, moves the way it does. It's a special kind of fabric made by Dr. Manhattan. It was initially a dress meant for one Kitty Genovese, but she was unfortunately assaulted and killed outside her apartment while people watched. This prompted him to become Rorschach, turning the dress into a face he could bear to look at in the mirror. This greatly disturbs Dr. Long, who we actually get to see a lot more of in the comic. We dive into his personal affairs and see how much his new patient has taken over his life. It's practically all he can talk about, to the point that his wife leaves him. Later, someone tries to shank Rorschach during lunch, but gets a face full of deep fryer oil instead.
None of you understand. I'm not locked up in here with you. You're locked up in here with me.
Later, he finally confronts Dr. Long, insulting him, explaining his philosophy, and saying that he won't say anything about Walter Kovacs, but he will talk about Rorschach. This leads into a flashback of an old case he was working on. He was looking for a little girl that went missing, but when he arrived at the scene, he found remains of her clothing and 2 dogs playing with human remains. In this moment, something in him snapped, and whatever was left of Walter Kovacs died that day. He fully became Rorschach. Once the killer returned to his home, he threw the dead bodies of the dogs at him, tied him up, and burnt the house down on top of him.
What, you gonna burn me? You can't do this! Stop! No! Oh God! No!
Back in the present, Laurie explores Dan's workshop and accidentally turns on Archie's flamethrower, which in the movie destroys the Night Owl suit. Yep, the ship's name is Archie. Maybe he knows the Punisher. Thankfully, Dan isn't very mad, and the two have a sweet moment with his owl goggles, which quickly turns into them hooking up. That night, Dan has a nightmare about the end of the world, and Laurie finds him naked staring at the suit closet. He's been motivated to become a hero again, so the two suit up and fly off into the night. They pick up a house fire on the police scanner, and once they get there, Dan puts out the fire with Archie's fire extinguishers while Laurie helps the civilians.
Dark Owl! Who wants to hear some music?
Mama told me not to, I did anyway, misbehaving.
After they drop them off, they hook up again with a fiery result, and later Dan says that he's starting to believe Rorschach's mass killer theory and wants to spring him out of prison. In the comic, one of the cops from the beginning comes to the house and intimidates Dan by pretending to ask questions about the fire from that night before, but in the movie, Hollis comes over instead to both congratulate and warn him about the police. Either way, Laurie and Dan suit back up and fly away to free Rorschach. And speaking of, he's stuck in his cell during a riot, at the mercy of Big Figure, a mob boss with an ironic appearance which Rorschach capitalizes on. He deals with Figure's thugs in pretty gruesome fashion and then starts pursuing the man himself.
Do nothing. Your move.
Meanwhile, Laurie and Dan break into Sing Sing with the help of his gadgets, and they find Rorschach pretty quickly, but he makes a quick trip to the bathroom that Big Figure was hiding in before leaving with them as blood runs under the door. He probably hit this Injustice move. Then the comic and movie split again, but only briefly. In the former, the three go back to Dan's house where Manhattan appears, telling Laurie that they're going to Mars to have a debate about the world. In the movie, that still happens, but Manhattan appears inside the ship directly after they escape the prison. Either way, Laurie goes with him to Mars. She even gets her own oxygen bubble. The dialogue here is great, but in short, the debate comes down to these two not being able to see things from each other's point of view. Plus, Manhattan is kind of sad that he got dumped and replaced with Dan. Laurie begrudgingly lets him mess with her head, and she starts flashing back to different moments in her past that all involve either her parents or the comedian. Here, Moore uses these 3 to 4 different scenes or memories and plays them on repeat, closing in on specific dialogue and details until Laurie comes to the realization that Blake was her father.
I will never, ever call you my father!
Out of disgust, fear, sadness, and clarity, she smashes Manhattan's glass temple and it comes crashing down around them. In the comics, she throws a bottle of Adrian's perfume, but in the movie, she just punches it. After the destruction, Manhattan now wants to help Laurie because her making this realization about Blake made him see humanity in a new, better light than before. Back on Earth, it's now Halloween, and some of the not top thugs get hyped up and go to Hollis's house and beat him up as a kind of superhero hate crime. He fights pretty well for a man of his age, but a not top grabs a statue of his old persona and beats him to death. Meanwhile, Dan and Rorschach are hiding from the authorities and looking for more leads. In the comic, they stop by Rorschach's apartment so he can grab a spare uniform, and he has a pretty crude argument with his landlord. Then, on the ship, he insults Dan, who just snaps and yells at him for being the sociopathic monster that he is. But they do make up and go to a bar to get some leads. Rorschach does his usual routine, but when Dan hears someone talking about Hollis's death, he goes for the throat and makes all these extreme threats. And shockingly enough, Rorschach is the one to calm him down, and they leave. I like how these two moments highlight their friendship, as flawed as both of them are as people. However, in the movie, Rorschach gets his uniform off-screen, and when Dan hears about Hollis's death on the radio, he insults him, and that's why Dan freaks out.
Who the hell do you think you are? You live off people while insulting them, and the only reason nobody complains is because they think you're a goddamn lunatic!
Regardless, they then go to Adrian's office and find out that the comedian's death, Manhattan's cancer scandal, and Rorschach's framing are all connected back to Adrian, who, if you've noticed, hasn't popped up very much because he's traveled to Karnak, his own personal palace in Antarctica. Before they head there, Rorschach puts his journal in a news drop-off. Eventually, they do arrive, and Dan dons his winter suit. In the comic, they land kind of far away because Archie froze up and broke down, and they take these funny scooter things to travel the rest of the way, but in the movie, they park right up against the palace. But they do get inside and find Adrian at the dinner table. Rorschach and Dan try their best to take him on, but he just wipes the floor with them while he slowly reveals his grand plan. It all started at the Crime Busters meeting in the 60s, when Captain Metropolis said someone needed to save the world, and Adrian took it upon himself to stop the Cold War and bring world peace. It took years, but he assembled a team of artists, writers, and geneticists to create a giant psychic alien squid monster that he plans to teleport to New York, which will kill millions in the resulting blast, but will unite the world's governments because of an alien invasion. Yeah.
What in the
In both the book and movie, there are a few scenes of the artists in question on the island before they get blown up to cover Adrian's tracks. However, one Superman stood in his way, of course, Dr. Manhattan, so he precisely hired old associates and people he knew and gave them all cancer to put pressure on Manhattan, causing him to leave for Mars. But another problem popped up. The comedian found the island and discovered the plan, which is why he was crying in Moloch's apartment, and that's why Adrian killed him, another loose end. And as we know, Rorschach has been investigating the murder, so he had Moloch killed and framed him for it. And to cover his tracks even more, he sent an assassin after himself and fed him the poison capsule. Dan says they won't let Adrian kill millions and lie to the world, but he simply responds by saying, "I did it 35 minutes ago." We see New York City, all of the recurring side characters from across the story, all being disintegrated by a giant wave of energy. The next thing we see are piles upon piles of dead bodies and the squid monster on top. Laurie and Manhattan are finally back on Earth, and he realizes that Adrian used some weird science machine to keep his mind away from his plans. They teleport again to Karnak, and Manhattan pursues Adrian through the halls until his pet lynx, Bubastis, leads him into the same kind of machine that killed him all those years ago. And with the push of a button, both of them are vaporized.
Fight. Don't.
Adrian then catches a bullet Laurie fired at him and continues to talk down to the three, but Manhattan reappears as a giant and tries to grab him. As he shrinks back down to human size, he explains how ineffective that machine is now, since he has powers, and how little the smartest man on Earth means to him. But just then, the TVs are all flooded with countless news reports, most of them saying that Russia and the US are putting aside their differences to defend Earth from the new alien threat.
I did it. I did it! I saved Earth from hell!
Adrian did it. He saved the world. And if any of them reveal the truth, the deaths of millions will all be for nothing. Laurie, Dan, and even Manhattan see that this is the only way and agree to keep the secret. But, of course, Rorschach will never compromise, even in the face of Armageddon. He goes outside, planning to fly back to America and tell everyone the truth. But Manhattan soon appears behind him. He can't let him go. So with no other options, Walter Kovacs takes off his mask and tells him to do it. And he does.
Do it.
In the book, these two are alone, but in the movie, Dan sees it happen, similar to the Snyder version, and honestly, I don't mind. Manhattan goes to Adrian's orrery and tells him that he's leaving Earth, to explore and create life somewhere else in the universe. Adrian asks if he did the right thing in the end, and Manhattan responds by saying that nothing truly ends. Sometime later, Sally is visited by Laurie and Dan, who are now going by Mr. and Mrs. Hollis to avoid the authorities. Laurie tells her that she knows Blake was her father, and they embrace. The new couple then leave, and Laurie mentions how much she wants her suit to be black, with armor and guns, much like her old man. Then we come to the very end. At the New Frontiersman newspaper, a young employee named Seymour is told to find something to print, his boss saying, "I leave it entirely in your hands," as he's about to pick up Rorschach's journal. Yeah, for all of Adrian's plans, Rorschach wins, meaning the world is still very much doomed. Doesn't matter when, but the truth will come out eventually. If you read the Doomsday Clock comic, it actually opens with that happening. Now, it is important to mention that the movies did cut out Janie Slater's interview with the Nova Express and most of the scenes at the newsstand. However, something that did make it in was the Black Freighter storyline. It's an in-universe comic that the newsstand kid was reading, and follows a sailor that was the only survivor of an attack by the Black Freighter pirate ship, and you see him slowly go crazy in a desperate attempt to save his family. It has some great parallels to the main story, especially with Adrian. In the movie, the scene where he fights off the assassin is synced up with the shark attack, and it's pretty good. I'm glad it was in the final version.
You shut up!
What is there to say about Dave Gibbons' art that hasn't been said already? The 9-panel format, the designs, the colors, the scale of the work, it's all great. After taking a graphic storytelling class at school, I feel very rewarded for rereading this book slowly. Now on to the animation. Studio Mir, who've previously worked on DC movies like Batman Soul of the Dragon, are in charge here, and I like what I see. There's definitely some Spider-Verse influence, especially with the action, and otherwise the movie is mostly a 3D version of the book, and it's cool to look at. I think the movie also snuck in a lot more smiley faces in the backgrounds, which is funny. Finally, we can get into the voice cast. Starting us off, we have Matthew Rice as Night Owl, and he's good, probably at his best towards the end when he argues with Rorschach.
You goddamn lunatic!
Moving on, Katie Sackhoff is the voice of Silk Spectre. We've seen her previously as Detective Essen in Batman Year One, and she's also played Bo-Katan in numerous Star Wars shows. Safe to say, she's pretty good.
You're an asshole.
Ozymandias is voiced by the Troy Baker, and he does a great job capturing the refined, decadent intelligence that the character is known for. We last saw him as Joker in Batman The Long Halloween, but he's done so many other projects, like Booker DeWitt from BioShock and the titular character from Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, both of which being some of my favorite video games of all time. His best scenes are probably when he realizes he saved the world and his conversation with John afterward.
I did the right thing, didn't I? It all worked out in the end.
Speaking of Manhattan, Michael Cerveris is doing a cool portrayal of him. He's probably best known for his music career, however, I knew him as Professor Pig from Gotham. Oh geez. Rick D. Wasserman, previously seen as the Hulk, plays the comedian, and he lands both the somber and aggressive moments.
You people hear Malek's back in town and you think, oh boy, let's gang up and bust him. Like that matters.
I may be biased because he's my favorite character in the story, but still. You can actually hear a bit of the Hulk in some scenes too.
And Ozzy here is gonna be the smartest man on the cinder. I'm gonna say this once. It's over.
Then comes Rorschach, voiced by Titus Welliver. Overall, probably the most controversial performance. I was a little unsure at first, but he grew on me, and by the time the prison arc started, I was into it. I've heard some people say he sounds tired or bad, and in certain places I can understand that, but it works for me because he's supposed to be a violent hobo freak, and having a voice that reflects those weird parts is kinda neat.
I've just broken this gentleman's little finger. Who killed Edward Blake?
Jackie Earle Haley's performance in the Snyder film was great, of course, but this one does deserve some merit. We've previously seen Titus as Carmine Falcone in The Long Halloween, but he is definitely better known for playing Harry Bosch from the show of the same name for over 10 years. Other notable voices are Jeffrey Combs as Moloch, and Phil Lamar, Gray Delisle, Yuri Lowenthal, and Jason Spicek as extras. Overall, a very strong and well-acted cast. This was a fun one.
You shut up!
So, upon rereading the book and watching the movies, it's time to decide which version is better, and I still think it's the book. That being said, I don't really have any problems with the movies. They're almost a full recreation of the book, and any changes that are made don't make the story worse. Like I said in the beginning, Dr. Manhattan first appearing in a flashback is a little weird, but it does kinda add mystery since you don't really know who he is. Part 2 is a little bit better than 1 in terms of performances and writing, but the two are mostly equal. However, part of the reason the comic book is so good is because it is a comic book. It's a deconstruction of not only the superhero genre, but also superhero comics as well. Ozzy kind of says as much. So, because of that, I don't think any adaptation can live up to it, which is a sentiment Alan Moore himself believed for a very long time. I haven't seen the Watchmen TV show, but I've been told by people who have that it stands out because it serves as a sequel, and explores the legacy of characters like Rorschach, Ozzy, and so on. If this were any other story, I'd call it a draw, but because Watchmen just is the way it is, the book wins, creating an 11-3 ratio of books to media, 16-8 if you include ties.
It's so sad Steve Jobs died of ligma.
Who the hell is Steve Jobs?
Ligma balls.
You shut up!
Well, I did what you said. Made a new Watchmen video. Now I, Mr. M, am gonna go home and play BioShock.
First of all, I said, you'll do what I say. And second of all, I don't know if there's much of a home for you to go back to with the antimatter wave.
Antimatter wave, Mr. M, who are you?
I'm the semi-monitor, and if you truly want to save your show and really your whole universe, you still have one book left to compare.
Oh, you've gotta be kidding me.
Nothing ends, Adrian. Nothing ever ends.